The sun burned like fire over the wide sands of Pakistan's Khalistan desert. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground was so hot that even the lizards hid under rocks. The wind blew dust into the sky, turning the horizon into a golden storm. But through that endless desert, one man walked, Pastor Samuel. He was a tall, gentle man with tired eyes but a strong spirit. His clothes were dusty, his sandals worn, and in his hand, he carried a small brown Bible that looked older than him. Every step he took left a deep mark in the sand, a mark of faith. Samuel had been traveling for 3 days. He had no car, no camel, and no companion, only his faith in Jesus. He was going to a small village hidden beyond the dunes. The people there had not heard about God's love, and he wanted to tell them that they were not forgotten. Even as his lips cracked from thirst, he whispered, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." When the sun began to fall, the desert turned into a sea of red and gold. Samuel found a small flat rock, built a fire with dry sticks, and sat beside it. The wind grew cold, and the stars slowly appeared like silver candles in the sky. He opened his Bible and began to read by the firelight. His voice was soft, but it carried far in the empty desert. Far away, beyond the hills of sand, 4 men were watching. They were criminals, men who lived by robbing travelers who crossed the desert roads. Their names were Malik, Iqbal, Rafiq, and Yasser. They were cruel and feared by everyone. That night, as they sat near their bikes, they saw the flickering light of Samuel's fire from a distance. "There," Malik said, pointing toward the glow. "A traveler, alone, easy catch," Iqbal grinned. "Let's take what he has before sunrise." They started their motorbikes, engines growling like angry beasts, and rode off into the darkness. The next morning, Pastor Samuel rose early. His face was calm, and his spirit bright. He looked at the sunrise, a golden ball rising out of the sands, and whispered, "Thank you, Jesus, for this new day." He knelt to pray when he heard something far away, a low rumbling sound. The earth seemed to shake softly. The sound grew louder. He looked up. 4 black motorbikes were speeding toward him, throwing clouds of dust behind them. Samuel stood slowly. His heart beat faster, but he felt no fear. The bikes stopped right in front of him. The men jumped down, their faces half covered with scars, eyes sharp and cold. Malik, the leader, stepped closer. "Who are you?" he barked. Samuel replied gently, "I am a servant of Jesus Christ. I came to share his love." The men burst into cruel laughter. "Love," Rafiq mocked. "In this desert, you must be lost, preacher." Malik grabbed Samuel by the collar. "Give us your money." "I have no money," Samuel said softly. "But I can give you a message that is worth more than gold." The men grew angrier. One of them kicked over his small bag, spilling the little bread and water he had saved. Yasser raised his knife and snarled, "Pray now, Pastor. Let's see if your Jesus saves you." Samuel closed his eyes and whispered, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." At that moment, something strange began to happen. The wind that had been silent suddenly howled, strong and wild. The sand around them started to rise like a storm. The sky darkened, even though it was morning. Malik looked up in fear. "What is this?" he shouted. Samuel opened his eyes, his face glowing with peace. "Jesus, show them that you are real." The ground trembled beneath them. A blinding light, brighter than the sun, flashed across the sky. The motorbikes fell over, their engines dead. The men stumbled back, shielding their faces, trembling as if struck by thunder. And through that powerful silence, they heard something, not from the sky, not from the earth, but from deep within the air around them, a voice gentle yet mighty. "Do not touch my servant." The wind stopped. The sand fell still. The light faded. The 4 men dropped their weapons. Their hands shook. None of them could speak. Pastor Samuel picked up his Bible from the sand, dusted it gently, and said, "You see, my Jesus is not far away. He is here, even in this desert." The men looked at one another, pale and trembling. They had come to rob a man, but they had met the power of God instead. And that was only the beginning. The desert was quiet again. The air stood still, as if time itself was afraid to move. The 4 men stared at Pastor Samuel, their eyes wide with fear. The memory of that blinding light was still burning in their minds. Malik, the leader, was the first to speak. His voice trembled. What was that? Did you see it? Rafik nodded, his face pale. I saw it. The sky, it spoke. Samuel's eyes were calm. His face shone softly like the morning sun after a storm. That, he said, was the power of Jesus. He protects those who call his name. The men said nothing. They looked at one another, then at the fallen bikes. None of the engines would start. It was as if an invisible hand had locked them still. Samuel knelt in the sand, opened his Bible, and began to pray. Malik stepped back. We need to leave this man. He's not ordinary. But Yasser, the youngest of them, shook his head. No, he's a magician. He's using tricks. He picked up his knife again and took a step toward Samuel. Stop, shouted Iqbal, grabbing his arm. Didn't you feel that light? That wasn't magic. That was power. But Yasser's heart was full of anger and confusion. He had never believed in God. He thought of all the things life had taken from him, his family, his home, his peace. His pain had turned into hate. He raised his knife again. If his Jesus is real, let him stop me. Samuel didn't move. His eyes were closed, lips moving in silent prayer. The wind began to blow again, stronger and stronger. The sand swirled around them, spinning like a small tornado. The fire that Samuel had built the night before, cold and dead, suddenly burst into flames again, tall and bright without anyone touching it. The men screamed and stumbled backward. The fire roared like a lion. From within the flames, they saw something, a glowing shape, bright and white, standing beside Samuel. It looked like a man, but not of this world. Light shone from him like 1,000 suns. Malik fell to his knees. It's an angel. He gasped. But Samuel knew. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered, Jesus. The figure moved, and the fire bent as if bowing to him. The heat vanished. The air filled with peace so deep that even the men's trembling stopped. A gentle voice spoke through the air. My servant came to bring peace, not harm. But the desert has seen enough blood. Let this place be a witness that I am alive. The light faded, but the peace remained. The 4 men dropped to the sand, shaking and crying. Yasser's knife fell from his hand. He looked at Samuel and said, We didn't know. We didn't know he was real. Samuel reached out his hand and helped him up. Now you know, he said kindly. Jesus is not far from you. He was watching even when you thought you were lost. Malik wiped his eyes and whispered, Can he forgive men like us? Samuel smiled. That's what he loves to do most. The men sat down around him, silent, broken, humbled. The fire still glowed, but now its warmth was gentle, not fierce. Samuel shared the story of how Jesus forgave even those who nailed him to the cross. The men listened like children hearing hope for the first time. Hours passed. The sun climbed high. When the story ended, something beautiful happened. The 4 men, once full of hate and pride, bowed their heads together and said, Jesus, forgive us. And in that moment, the desert that once knew only heat and death felt alive again. The sand seemed to sparkle, the wind carried a soft peace, and even the broken bike suddenly started when Malik turned the key. Samuel looked at the sky and smiled. Thank you, Lord, he whispered. You turned fear into faith. The men offered to take him to the next village on their bikes. Samuel agreed. As they rode through the desert, something new filled their hearts. Not fear, not greed, but peace. The desert stretched endlessly before them, golden, vast, and quiet. The sun burned bright above, but this time, it felt different. The wind no longer roared with anger. It whispered softly, almost like a song. 4 men and 1 pastor rode through the dunes, men who, just hours ago, had come to kill, but now rode beside the man they once hated. The air between them was still, but peaceful. Pastor Samuel sat behind Malik on one of the motorbikes. His hands held the small Bible close to his chest, and his heart overflowed with gratitude. He smiled at the men and said, You see, the same Jesus who saved me wants to save others through you. Malik turned slightly, his eyes still wet. Pastor, he said, we don't deserve this. We were thieves, murderers. How can he love us? Samuel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Because mercy isn't earned, he replied softly. It's a gift. You just need to open your heart to it. They rode for hours until the sun climbed high into the sky. The heat returned, pressing down like a heavy blanket. Their throats were dry, and their bottles were empty. The desert, once peaceful, began to feel endless again. Yasser, the youngest, shaded his eyes. "Pastor," he said weakly, "we have no water. We can't make it much further." Samuel looked around. There was nothing but sand in every direction. He lifted his eyes toward heaven and prayed, "Lord, you gave your people water in the wilderness. Show us mercy now." Just as he finished speaking, Malik's motorbike began to sputter. "It's out of fuel," he said, stopping. The others stopped too. One by one, the bikes went silent. They were stranded. The sun was fierce now. The ground shimmered. Their lips cracked. Fear began to creep into their hearts again. Rafik groaned, "We're going to die out here. Maybe this is punishment." But Samuel knelt on the sand, lifted his face, and said, "No, my God does not lead his children into death. Watch, he is near." He pressed his hand to the ground, closed his eyes, and prayed in silence. The men stood still, watching. Minutes passed. The desert wind blew hot and dry. And then, a strange thing happened. The ground beneath Samuel's hand began to tremble softly. The men stepped back. "Pastor, what's happening?" Malik whispered. Samuel opened his eyes and said calmly, "The Lord is answering." A deep rumbling sound came from beneath the sand. Suddenly, the earth cracked, and a small stream of clear water burst out, splashing over Samuel's hands. The men gasped and fell to their knees. Rafik cried out, "A well! There's water!" The stream widened, forming a little pool in the sand. The men ran to it, cupping the water in their hands, drinking deeply, tears mixing with laughter. Yasser shouted joyfully, "It's sweet. It's real." Malik looked at Samuel, speechless. "How is this possible?" Samuel smiled and said, "Because Jesus said, 'Whoever drinks the water I give will never thirst again.'" They all sat beside the pool, tired, soaked, but alive. The men washed their faces, and for the first time in years, they felt clean, not just on the outside, but in their souls. As they rested, Samuel told them the story of the woman at the well, how Jesus offered her living water that could wash away all pain and shame. When he finished, Yasser looked down and whispered, "That woman, she was just like us." Samuel nodded. "And Jesus loved her, just like he loves you." The men bowed their heads in silence. The desert wind was cool now. The pool glowed in the sunlight like a small miracle in a sea of dust. Hours later, they refilled their bottles and continued their journey. But they didn't ride like before. They rode with hope. The same desert that once tried to kill them was now the place where mercy flowed. As they neared the village, Samuel looked back at the pool shimmering in the distance. He whispered, "Thank you, Jesus. You turned the desert of fear into a well of mercy." And high above, the clouds began to gather, small drops of rain falling for the first time in months. The desert was changing. After many hours, the desert hills began to fade, and small mud houses appeared in the distance, a lonely village hidden among the dunes. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the sand. Thin lines of smoke rose from clay rooftops where people cooked their evening meals. It looked peaceful from far away, but as they rode closer, Pastor Samuel could feel something heavy in the air. The men slowed their bikes. Rafik frowned. "This place, it feels strange." Yasser nodded. "It's too quiet. No children, no laughter." Samuel's eyes softened. He knew that kind of silence. It was the silence of fear. When they entered the village, faces appeared behind wooden doors and torn curtains. The people stared, eyes filled with worry, not welcome. A few older men came out cautiously. One of them, with a white beard and deep lines on his face, asked, "Who are you strangers? What brings you here?" Samuel stepped forward and smiled. "Peace be with you. My name is Pastor Samuel. We come to share good news, the message of love and life." The old man's eyes darkened. He looked around nervously. "Speak softly," he whispered. "There are ears that should not hear those words." Malik frowned. "What do you mean?" The man glanced toward a tall stone tower at the edge of the village. "A gang controls this place. They call themselves the Shadows. They take what they want, hurt who they wish. Anyone who speaks of another god or peace is punished. Please, leave before they see you." But Samuel did not move. His voice was calm. I did not come to turn back. Jesus sent me here. This village will not belong to fear forever. The man shook his head sadly. You don't understand. Many have tried to stand against them, none have lived. Suddenly, the sound of engines broke the air, rough, loud, and angry. The villagers scattered into their homes. From behind the tower, 6 men on motorbikes stormed into the square, armed with sticks and guns. Their leader wore a long black coat and a red scarf. His name was Rashid, the most feared man in the region. He stopped in front of Samuel and the others. Who are you? He demanded. Before Samuel could answer, one of the villagers whispered from behind a door, They are travelers, sir. They mean no harm. Rashid glared. Silence. Malik stood beside Samuel, his voice steady. We are not here for trouble. Rashid smirked. Oh, Malik, I know you. He pointed his gun at him. The thief who used to work for me, now traveling with a preacher. Have you gone mad? Malik lowered his head. I've found something better than fear, Rashid. I've found mercy. Rashid laughed coldly. Mercy. In this land, you've been fooled. He turned to Samuel. And you, old man, what God do you preach? Samuel looked into his eyes, unafraid. I speak of Jesus, the one who brings light where there is darkness. The crowd gasped. Rashid's face twisted with anger. That name is forbidden here. He raised his gun. You speak it again, and you die. The 4 men moved protectively around Samuel. The villagers peeked through their windows, trembling. The tension was heavy. The air felt ready to break. Samuel raised his hand slowly and said, You may take my life, Rashid. But you cannot kill the truth. Before Rashid could pull the trigger, a strong wind rushed through the square. The fire lamps hanging on the houses flickered wildly. The sky darkened, even though it was still afternoon. Then, a sudden bolt of lightning split the air, striking the top of the stone tower. The ground shook. Everyone screamed and fell to their knees. The tower cracked and began to crumble, its stones crashing into the sand. The gun flew from Rashid's hand. His men dropped their weapons and ran. Samuel stood still, untouched, the wind swirling around him. His voice rose clear through the dust. Jesus is Lord, even here. The storm stopped as quickly as it began. The air turned calm. The villagers stepped out of their homes slowly, eyes wide in awe. Rashid, shaking, fell to the ground. His voice cracked as he said, What power is this? Samuel walked toward him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Not power to destroy, he said gently, but power to save. Rashid looked up, tears mixing with the dust on his face. Can he forgive even me? Samuel smiled. He already has, if you let him. The villagers began to gather. Mothers wept. Children peeked out from behind their parents. For the first time in many years, they felt something stronger than fear, hope. Samuel lifted his Bible and said, This village will no longer be ruled by shadows. The light has come. That night, the people came out of hiding. They lit candles all around the square. Malik and the others helped rebuild what had fallen. And when the stars appeared, Pastor Samuel led them all in prayer under the open sky. The wind was gentle. The desert was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of peace. The next morning, the sun rose over the village of shadows, but it was not the same village anymore. Light touched every roof, every street, every heart. The night before, the people had prayed together for the first time in many years. Now, as dawn broke, the air was filled with quiet joy. The fear that once ruled was gone. Something holy had taken its place. Pastor Samuel stood outside the small clay house where he had slept. The desert wind brushed gently against his face. He looked around and smiled. Children were laughing again, and men were repairing broken walls while women carried water from the well. It was as if life had been reborn. Malik came to him, holding a basket of bread. Pastor, he said, the people say they want to build a house of prayer here, a place where we can meet and thank Jesus. Samuel's eyes softened. That is a beautiful thing, my brother. But the true house of God is built in our hearts. Behind Malik, Rashid appeared slowly. His red scarf was gone. His face was humble, and his eyes were full of tears. He came to Samuel and knelt before him. Pastor, he said quietly, I destroyed this place for years. I hurt innocent people, but last night, when the tower fell, I saw my own darkness break with it. I don't want to be who I was. Samuel placed his hand on Rashid's head. You already aren't, he said gently. Jesus has made you new. The villagers gathered around, their faces bright with peace. Together, they began to sing a simple song, one of hope, one of freedom. The sound rose over the desert, carried by the wind like a promise. But suddenly, the wind grew stronger again. The sand swirled around them in circles, not violently, beautifully, like golden ribbons dancing in the air. The people stopped singing and looked up. Above them, the sky glowed brighter and brighter until a shining light appeared, the same light that had saved Samuel before. The villagers gasped. Malik whispered, "It's him again." Samuel fell to his knees, tears flowing down his face. The light seemed alive, filled with love so strong it could be felt in every heartbeat. A voice came from within the light, gentle yet mighty, echoing through every soul present. You have seen my mercy. Now go and give it. Where there is darkness, shine. Where there is hate, love. My glory will walk with you, even in the desert. The light spread across the sky, and for a moment, it looked like the whole horizon was made of gold. Then, slowly, it faded into the morning sun. But its warmth remained, deep inside everyone's heart. The people began to cry and hug one another. Some fell on their knees, praising God. Rashid looked at Samuel and said, "We must tell other villages what happened here. They need to know that the same Jesus who came to you, came to us too." Samuel nodded. "Yes, Rashid, the desert will tell his story." And so, they did. Malik, Rafiq, Yasser, and Rashid, once criminals, became messengers of peace. They traveled with Samuel across the land, sharing the story of what they had seen, how Jesus showed his power in the desert, how water flowed from the sand, how light broke through darkness. Everywhere they went, hearts changed. Fear turned to faith, hate turned to love. The story spread far beyond the dunes, and the desert that once held only death became known as the Desert of Glory. Years later, travelers who passed through the region would stop by that same pool of water that had once saved their lives. And if they listened closely to the wind, they would hear a soft voice, the echo of a miracle. Fear not, I am with you, even in the desert. Summary: in the burning deserts of Pakistan, a humble pastor named Samuel set out to share the message of Jesus. But along the way, he was attacked by 4 violent criminals who planned to rob and kill him. When they mocked him to pray for help, he did, and heaven answered. A blinding light filled the desert, the earth shook, and the men were thrown to their knees. Jesus revealed his power, protecting his servant and turning the hearts of the criminals to repentance. The same men who came to harm Samuel began to follow him. Together, they witnessed another miracle, water springing from the dry desert when they were dying of thirst. Later, they reached a village ruled by fear and darkness. When the gang leader there threatened to kill Samuel, God's power struck again. Lightning split the tower of oppression, setting the people free. The village turned to faith, and the desert became a place of peace and healing. The story ends with the men who once walked in sin now spreading the message of love and mercy. The desert that once knew only death became known as the Desert of Glory. Moral lesson: God's power is real, even in the most hopeless places. Faith over fear. When you trust Jesus completely, He will stand by you no matter how dark the situation looks. Forgiveness changes hearts. Even the worst sinner can become a messenger of peace when touched by God's love. Light always conquers darkness. No matter how deep the shadows, Jesus' presence brings freedom, peace, and life. You are never alone. In every desert, in pain, fear, or danger, Jesus walks beside you. The end.